Okay, right off the top of the episode, my apologies, this might sound a little bit choppy. I got 3 different questions on Tumblr and I couldn't stretch them all into the full length of an episode because they were fairly short answers, but I still wanted to give them the due diligence of the nuance that I wanted to talk about them with. So I have recorded them in 3 different sections and they'll play one after the other. They're all thematically linked, but it might mean that it sounds a little bit choppy and we're going to different things. You can skip around if you need. I'll put episodes in the description and there should be sections somewhere around here. So I hope that is particularly useful to you. If you like this format better than the format I did last week, please get in touch and let me know. I'm trying different things over here, and unless anyone says otherwise, I'm just going to go with what I like. But this was a fun way of recording that took a lot of the stress off of trying to figure out what to say for 15 minutes and feeling like I was waffling and killing time. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope you enjoy today's episode. So Anonymous has asked, "Hi, can you give some advice about increasing your skills after you have mastered basics and what that looks like in terms of elevating your craft? What should I be practicing and mastering in order?" So in regards to your question about what essentially advanced witchcraft looks like and how you get there, I think advanced witchcraft is kind of a really broad term. I split it up into 4 ideas, but I don't think that it's fair to segregate people based on advanced witchcraft and basic witchcraft, because they're very much interrelated and they flow very much one into each other, and you can be advanced, quote unquote, advanced in certain areas of the craft and basic in other areas. For example, I'm quite proficient in divination and crystals, but I am so awful at spirit work because I haven't put as much time into it. So the first one on my list is to make correspondence tables for yourself. We see these massive lists of things on Pinterest of correspondence tables that you should memorize. Lavender is for calming or whatever. And something that's really important is that you then adapt that for yourself. I'm not saying ignore those correspondence tables, but they're really much easier to memorize when they're associated with your own memories and your own feelings. So lavender is a really good example. I always associate lavender with my mother. It was the scent that she wore when I was growing up, and she took me to a lavender field a lot and she helped me out with my anxiety a lot, and so I always associate lavender with my mother. So lavender is more broadly about parenthood and maternal feelings and mother in a female guidance aspect, and so it's associated with a lot of the female deities that I work with that are in positions of authority, like Hera and Hestia. You can inform your own interpretations, but to me, lavender is calming, but it's less, generic calming and more specifically associated with the ideal of femininity and motherhood in that aspect. The second one is developing your own personal relationships. So this can be with the divine if you believe in deities, or spirits if you believe in spirits and that is a part of your practice to content those. It can be ancestors, it can be like plants, anything, but also a community if you are non-solitary, or even if you are solitary, it can still be beneficial to find other people in your area. There will be older pagans about somewhere for a lot of you, and even then there will be digital communities for that kind of thing. So getting into a community and finding the right community that challenges you in a kind way, that isn't just people, and I mean this with the most respect, but a lot of Discord servers I've been are people regurgitating the same shit over and over again, if you pardon my French. It's just people rehashing Pinterest posts and Tumblr posts back at each other, and then you get this echo chamber, and sometimes it's things that aren't even true, claims that don't exist, or an experience that an individual had once and has now become the general rule for a deity, when that isn't the case. So try and find somewhere that will challenge you, that utilizes research, that has a variety of opinions, and that is filled with people whose interest lies in outside of feeling like they're a powerful witch and letting their ego get in the way, and more about the pursuit of knowledge. The final thing that is on my list is spell freedom. This is something that I talked about, it was talked about in a post I reblogged a couple back, so I'll see if I can link it. But essentially is, are your spells written down? Are you looking at a spell book? There's nothing wrong with that. But do you understand why all your spell components work? Can you make it, if you need to, make a spell off the top of your head? And can you utilize what's around you, or do you need to get fancy, expensive ingredients? It's a little bit like cooking. Most people can follow a recipe, but can you, on the fly, if someone goes, "Can you bake me a cookie?" know what ingredients, make a cookie, and use what you have around you as a substitute where you can? if the answer is yes, I would argue that you're an advanced witch, with big quotation marks. If the answer is no, then that's something to work on, is feeling comfortable within spells. And again, that will come with forming your own associations and, finding that community and learning from other people. I hope that helped. If you have any further questions, please do. Finding that community and learning from other people.
Hello, hope I'm not being too much of a bother.
That helped.
I've been struggling with
further
paganism and
questions,
witchcraft as a whole. I'm closeted witch right now. Hopefully I'll be out of my parents' house soon, so there's not much I can do. Do you have any tips and tricks to help me connect more with my craft as well as my deities? There's not much I can give them right now, and I feel like I'm ignoring them, and I feel horrible. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for your question. You're not being a bother at all. Honestly, the thing that I would focus on here are less the practical aspects of being a closeted witch and struggling to find things to do, but the deeper root feeling, which is the need to perform or achieve something in order for your deities to like you. I'm not sure which deities you work with, but I can reassure you that your deities and your craft is not going anywhere. You have the entirety of your life to figure out who you want to be and where you want to be in regards to paganism and the craft, but also in terms of everything. And right now, it feels like that you're craving that connection, and you should honour that, and we'll get to some more practical tips in a minute, but you should honour that from a desire to experience and less of the shame of feeling like that you should be doing this. There is no should. If this doesn't align with you right now, it's really difficult being a closeted witch. I feel you. If that doesn't align with you right now, if it's not safe for you to do so, or it's a lot of effort and it feels really impractical and you don't have the energy to do that right now, I promise you, your deities and your future self would not want you to expend effort and energy that you don't have. That is not an act of devotion, that is an act of sacrifice, and that should not be done. That would be unhealthy. So only do the things I'm suggesting if you have the energy to put into them, if this feels right. But if it feels like it's coming from a place of shame or like fear of abandonment from your deities, fear that they're going to leave, or that you're ignoring them, and like, listen, deities are eternal and beautiful and effervescent and outside human comprehension. I promise you, your relationship is worth more than them feeling ignored. It's not our human relationships that we're used to. There isn't that push and pull, and there isn't that need in them. It is much more of a synergy of energies relating to one another. They're not looking for direct contact in sense of that you have to do things for them, that you have to devote yourself to them. I promise you, we have this fear in ourselves that we're going to face the wrath of the gods if we don't do what we think that we're expected to do. But I am taking the stance here. I firmly believe that comes from organised religion, and specifically Christianity for a lot of people, and that is rooted in shame and fear of not being good enough for a deity, of not being good enough for God, of not being good enough to each other and to ourselves. The fear of letting down ourselves of what we think we should be is terrifying, and I really feel for you, because that is awful. But only do the following tips I'm going to give you if it's coming from a place of love and joy and curiosity, and not from a place of shame, is the short of it. So, moving on to some actual tips. The main one here, and I'm going to be focusing more on the deity aspect, is talk to your deities. This does not have to be out loud, but it can be. This can be in your head, and it doesn't have to be a prayer. Some people like the formality of a prayer. They like putting their hands together, and they like opening and closing the statement, and it feels official, but it feels right to them. It feels natural to do that. Other people, like myself, have much more of a free-flowing conversation with deities, and I tend to access a almost dreamlike state when I'm convening with them. It's not quite lucid dreaming, it's not quite daydreaming, it's not quite a trance, it's somewhere in between all of those, and I'm not sure the name for it, but it's none of those. And that's, from the outside, you would not be able to tell. You would essentially just think I was zoning out really hard. And I just do that in my room by myself. I don't need anyone to bear witness to that, and so that is probably the most easiest way that you can connect with your deities, is just doing that. Something else that's been taking the rounds on Tumblr right now, which I find super useful as somebody who is often very low on energy due to being disabled, is the concept of emotional acts of devotion to your deities. So if you are like bringing your friends, like walking your friends home, that's a devotional act to Hermes, for example, or doing your makeup is a devotional act to Aphrodite, and looking yourself in the mirror and pepping yourself up is a devotional act to Aphrodite. I work with Hestia a lot, and I like the idea that cooking and cleaning and taking care of myself and those basic tasks become devotional, and they're not inherently witchy. Like, no one's gonna see me making soup in the kitchen and think, witch, although I do dress like it. But yeah, they're not going to automatically see that and go, witchcraft. I'm just feeding myself, it's just sustenance, but that is still divine. There's magic in the mundane, you know? And so leaning into that, leaning into what you're already doing and just making it a little bit witchy. And of course I have to recommend the classic small everyday witchy things you can do, the classic of stirring your tea clockwise or counterclockwise for banishment or cleansing. Although I will admit, I have no idea which round it goes, and I just fluff it every time. I just decide in the moment which way is abundance and which way is banishment, and I just go with the flow, but decide whatever feels right to you. But that is, you know, the classic thing that we all did. And if you're of legal drinking age in your country, may I recommend mocktails or cocktails or coffee if you're underage, anything where you have to assemble aspects of things and different ingredients into a drink, because it feels very much like potion making. Same with soup and things like that. You feel like you're making a potion. And simmer pots are good too if you can get away with them, depending on how relaxed the people around you are, depending on your definition of closeted. So you can also do those, but anything that's liquidy will feel like a potion, and you will feel much more like a witch. And you can learn about the ingredients of the things that you're putting in there and the intention and make it a spell, and to the outside it's not going to look any different. You're just making a cocktail or a mocktail or a coffee, but to you it's for warmth and for luck and for protection and for energy and for good blessings for your day. I mean, anything that you intend, you can make it work. You can change up the ingredients of your coffee to act in certain ways. There are so many things that you can do, and I think that the number one advice here is turn the mundane into the magical. Don't try and add things that seem obvious, but turn, you know, the stuff that is already here. The witches, the pagans of ye olde wouldn't have had access to the amount of stuff we do now. And they would have had some of these traditions, but their day-to-day would have been doing things like making soup and stirring their drinks a certain way and little superstitions like that, and also a lot more about animals and crops and things. But getting in touch with that is also really beneficial if that's something that feels right to you. If you're aspire to be in tune with nature, go on walks, go look outside and observe the changes in the seasons. That is witchy, and that's more specifically to a lot of people pagan, but you choose what resonates with you and what words you vibe with. But you can go and do that and observe the change in the season and buy local produce and get in touch with that. And again, that won't look outwardly pagan, but that will give you a connection to nature, a route into earth, for lack of a better term. And you will feel much more content, much more confident in your craft. I hope this helped, and I hope that I answered your question successfully. Let me know if you have any more questions, and thank you very much for asking. And now this question is very much linked to the last one. It's from Anonymous, and it says, "Hi, I am a Hellenistic polytheist and recently had a dip in my connection to my gods. Some school stuff mixed with medical worries made me struggle to worship beyond quick prayers or small offerings throughout the day. Do you have any advice on getting back into worship?" This very much relates to what I was just talking about, which is the idea of feeling like a devotee, feeling like a worshipper, feeling like you're working with a god, feeling that connection is often an internal experience. And I'm not saying abandon doing offerings, abandon prayer, abandon anything that feels right to you. And I'm not saying the connection's all in your head either, but how you feel about yourself directly impacts how you feel about your relationship with your deities and with your craft. And, you know, that is what you should be putting your energy into, is that if you feel disconnected from deity, from witchcraft, from the spiritual realm, from nature, from any of those things, the two things that you need to do are heal your connection with yourself. Remind yourself that you don't have to do any of this, that there's no shame in not doing an offering, there's no shame in not doing a prayer, there's no shame in communicating with your deities that, this is really difficult for you right now and you don't have the energy, and I promise you they will not ask you to do something, and they should not ask you to do something that is more energy than you can give, because that is not a healthy dynamic, and your deities should and will want what is best for you. The second thing is to get back into it, which I know is a little bit of a weird way of answering this question. Do you have any advice of getting back into worship? And the answer is just do it, like the Nike advert. But what I mean by this is that if you are lacking connection, sometimes you have to jump feet first, heart full into something. And you shouldn't worry about if it's perfect. You shouldn't worry about if your deity is getting enough prayers, if they're getting enough offerings. You shouldn't worry about that. You should just feel. And if what you feel is that you need to go stand outside with your shoes off in the grass, go do that. If what you feel like you need to do is have a good old chin wag with a deity, do that. If you feel like you need to do formal ritualized prayer, if you need to veil, whatever brings you that connection. But working it out can be difficult. And so I'd recommend trying a bunch of things and essentially throwing shit at the wall to see what sticks. But what is really important is reinvesting that energy back into yourself, making sure that you feel better and putting yourself as your number one priority. Because as soon as you start to place something else above yourself, a deity or witchcraft or nature or any of those things, spirits, any of those connections, they are important. But as soon as you start placing them above yourself, you start losing yourself. And then you start conforming to what you think you should be doing. And everybody has their own idea. We don't have sacred scripture for a lot of us in paganism or witchcraft. It depends on, obviously your form. But a lot of us don't have sacred scripture. There is no list of ways to be devotional or work with a deity. There's no guide. There's no handbook. All we have are the way people used to do it and the way people do it now. And there's so much variation in that. So pick what feels right to you, have chats with people, go contact others, go scroll through Tumblr and pick bits that feel right to you, but don't put the pressure on yourself to do it the way other people do it, and don't put pressure on yourself if you're struggling to do it at all. The world will not end if you don't pray to your deity for however long. They will still be there, your craft will still be there, you can access this whenever, I promise you. That is my advice. I hope that helped, although it wasn't very practical. Thank you very much for your question, and I also hope that your school stuff and your medical worries ease, that your pain eases, and that everything becomes a little bit easier and a little bit lighter in your heart. Have a great day. Thank you very much for listening to today's episode. That brings it to a close, but I hope that it was enjoyable and informative. See you next week, and until then, stay curious and have a blessed day.